Yelling with everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. I hope that you are all keeping well and safe during this current pandemic. I would like to start off by thanking our panelists, Serena Tejpar, Zia Saleh, and Kahir Remtala for taking the time to speak with us today about applications for medical school. My name is Alia and I will be your moderator for today. The objective of this webinar is to provide participants with strategies on how to prepare when applying for med school, how to write a personal statement, what extracurriculars should you select, how do you prepare for your MCAT and other financial responsibilities, how to prepare for your interview, and how to adjust to lifestyle after med school. Please ensure that you do have audio. If you prefer, you can dial in through your phone by selecting the telephone option on the dashboard. I would like to quickly acknowledge our Aga Khan Education Board for Canada team. Again, as I mentioned, my name is Alia Ramtullah Thurani, and I'm the National Convener for Graduate Studies Resource Mobilization for the Aga Khan Education Board for Canada. We also have Aries Remtullah, who is the project lead for the Graduate Resource Support Team, and our webinar support team for GRST, Nadim Ramtullah and Imran Kaku. We also have our webinar team for the Aga Khan Education Board for Canada. Now, the goal for the graduate studies strategy for post-secondary students is to encourage more undergraduate students to pursue a master's and PhD program. We're also looking to assist students in applying to various graduate schools and assist them on becoming better graduate candidates overall and successful. Through the Graduate Resource Support Team, also known as GRST, we aim to help students become better equipped by graduate school by providing the tools necessary to foster professional and application development, to foster a supportive environment for students to discuss their challenges and successes with one another, and encouraging skill set development and academic network building. One way we do this is through our webinar series, which is held regularly. So if you are interested for future webinars, please feel free to sign up via email through our survey link that will be sent at the end of the webinar. Some of our upcoming webinars include a focus on dentistry, pharmacy, and scholarships. Now you might be wondering, how do you ask questions through our webinar today? So please ask them through the chat feature of the webinar, which you should see on the right. We will take note of the questions and ask them during our question and answer period after each panelist has done their presentation. Any questions that we do not get to, we will definitely forward to our panelists who would be more than willing to answer them offline. Now I would like to welcome our first panelist, Kahir Remtala. Kahir is currently a third-year medical student at the University of Alberta. Before pivoting toward a career in medicine, Kahir completed internships at Stantec and Imperial Oil with a focus in oil and gas. Professionally, his interests lie in emerging health technologies, clinical research, and global health. Again, to our members, if you have any questions for Kahir, please make sure to ask them in the designated question box. We will answer the questions at the end. I would now like to welcome Kahir Remtala.
Yalim Abed, everyone. My name is Kahir. I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Alberta. Very happy for you to join us today. Very grateful to have the chance to talk to you. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about being a non-traditional applicant and applying to medical school. I want to draw on some of the learnings from my own experiences, as well as give you some tips and tricks to hopefully make the process of applying a bit smoother for you. When we talk about the non-traditional applicant, essentially we're talking about someone who is not in a science program with the goal of pursuing medical school. So this can be someone who is doing something quite different currently in school, or someone who is in a different career and established in it and is trying to pivot towards a medical one. So how I kind of fit into that picture is I originally had studied engineering at Queen's. I'd done a 60-month internship in oil and gas in between my third and my fourth year. And I really had a big question in terms of where I wanted to go after this, in terms of what was going to make me fulfilled in a career. So I went back to Queen's, not really knowing what I was going to do, and decided to apply to medical school. And so that summer, I decided to write the MCAT. I decided to apply to medical school, and the year in between graduating and starting medical school, I actually started a Master's of Science in Biomedical Engineering and Medicine at the University of Alberta. And then I was lucky enough to be able to finish that concurrently with my first year of medical school. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. But before we kind of dig into the different components of the application, I think it's important that at some point you take a step back and really ask yourself, why are you applying to medical school? What are your ambitions? What are your values? What drives you from your core? And does becoming a doctor align with those ambitions and values? And I think more from a realistic perspective, considering what are your barriers. So for some people, those are going to be financial. For others, it's going to be social or mental or time related. So thinking about those early on and how you're going to mitigate them, I think is important to consider. So now I just want to dissect through the different components or deliverables of the medical school application, and again, give you some tips. This is not supposed to be comprehensive, but more geared towards the non-traditional applicant. So when we think about coursework and GPA, I won't spend too much time here because a lot of medical schools don't actually require prerequisites anymore. This is because the thought process is that if you write the MCAT, you have the material that you need to start medical school. However, I would, if you were still in school, I would ask you to consider taking courses in things like biochemistry, biology, chemistry, and maybe physics to get a core foundation in the topics that will be covered in the MCAT, because I think it will make your studying so much easier. And this is something that I wish that I had done. So consider that. GPA wise, important thing to note, most schools don't care about how difficult or easy your program is when they look at your GPA. They just care about what the number is. So keep that in mind. That's for most schools. In terms of the exact number, no one really knows what is a good and what isn't a good GPA. But I would say, one, look at the cutoffs at the schools and make sure you're meeting those. Two, in my opinion, I think a good range to aim for is kind of that A- to A+ range. And then three, if your GPA isn't the greatest, that's okay, because some schools, it'll be harder to get in, but other schools, they're going to value the other parts of your application more. And if you really exceed in those other aspects, you can still do well and still get into medical school. Okay, now general MCAT tips. So the first thing we can talk about is length of study. So the trick here is you want to study long enough that you can absorb all the material, but not so long that you start forgetting the material. And for most people, that tends to be about 2 to 4 months over a summer in their undergraduate. And when they're studying for this, people tend to treat it as kind of like a 9-to-5 job. So you're studying between 30 to 40 hours a week. So it's quite an intensive period of studying. And if you are limited with other commitments, you're not able to dedicate this much time, that's perfectly fine. You can still cater your schedule to ensuring that it meets your other commitments and still do well. Course versus not a course. So the biggest consideration here is cost. Courses tend to be quite expensive. And I would say you don't necessarily need to do a course to do well in the MCAT. The pros of doing a course is if your learning style works well with being in a classroom, or I guess in our scenario, a virtual classroom, that's a good positive. And then the other thing is, if you look at yourself honestly, and if you're not that motivated to study, taking a course might actually make you more motivated and keep you on track. So those would be some of the reasons why I would do a course. Study resources. So a lot of people buy books from companies that are specialized in the MCAT, and those are great because they give you all the material you need to study to do well in this nice little package, so you don't have to worry about pulling resources from other places to do well. However, the downside to those is they do cost money. And I would say, regardless if you are financially limited or not, to invest money in the AAMC practice tests and question banks, because these are the people that actually write the questions for the MCAT, and the style of questions in these resources are going to be most representative of what you will see on test day. And so prioritizing these resources, and I would suggest doing the AAMC practice test towards the end of your studying, because the scores that you get on those tests are going to be very close to what you will get on test day. In my own personal experience, anecdotally talking with my friends, and that seems to be kind of the best surrogate for how well you will do. Taking practice tests early, I think a lot of people like to try and master the content first before doing questions, but I would suggest you to actually not do that and actually start doing questions quite early on, as early as your first week of studying. And I would even do a practice test in your first week as kind of a diagnostic test to see what do you do well, what do you need to prove, and how can you tailor your studying towards that. Another good reason for doing practice tests early is, as important as it is to master the content, it's important to master how the questions are written, what kind of patterns they're looking for in their answers, and just getting used to writing a lengthy exam, because that's as important as mastering the content, in my personal opinion. Other tips: focusing on high yield topics. So something like biochemistry, which invades 2 out of the 4 sections of the MCAT, knowing the high yield topics in biochemistry like amino acids and enzymes will definitely help you to improve your score. Something that I did that worked well for me that you could consider is making a cheat sheet for those high yield topics and kind of reviewing them periodically during your study period. Recreate the test environment. So the adage here is practice how you would play, right? So if the actual MCAT on your test day is written at 8 a.m., write your practice tests at 8 a.m. Make sure they're timed, and try and recreate all the scenario as best as you can as test day. And you might find this a bit extreme, but I even would eat similar foods on practice tests that I would eat on the actual exam day, just to recreate the situation as best as I can. Because when it comes down to test day, the more familiar you are, the less nerves you're going to have, the more comfortable you'll feel, and you'll just be able to get into a rhythm and just write it like it's any other test. Review your practice test properly. This one is tricky because I think a lot of us like to go through as many practice tests as we can before writing the actual one. And as important as that is, it's just as important to take the time to review. And I would suggest starting out the first couple practice tests to even take a whole day to review just one practice test. And the reason for that is when you review, you want to go through all the passages, you want to go through all the questions, you want to go through all the different choices for those questions and review, why is this answer right? Why is this answer wrong? And do I know why? And do I know how that relates back to the passage? Do I understand the passage? And so really fleshing those details out are one of the best ways to improve your score. And I would say another tip is to consider making a log of the types of questions you get wrong. So whether that's content related or reading comprehension related, and then you can use that to reflect on how you want to change what you're studying to tackle those low-hanging fruit of questions that you seem to keep getting wrong. Now I want to transition into talking a little bit about how to write your applications and how to write your extracurriculars, because most applications, they give you this small box and they'll give you something like 200 characters. You have to talk about, experience you've been doing for the past 10 years. So what do you want to include in that small box? The first thing I would say is for non-traditional applicants, you don't necessarily need the kind of traditional medical experiences that a lot of people in pre-med will have. Although it's good to show interest early, I think the more important thing is to relate the experiences you've had in the past to show that they have made you into someone who has medicine-related qualities. And what those qualities are encompassed in the CanMeds framework. And this is something you can Google, just Google CanMeds and it'll show up. And you can read through it a bit more, but those are the qualities you want to aim to hit in your application. The biggest mistake people make when they write their applications is they just write, I did X and I was president of X and I did this. And it's very descriptive, but they don't actually talk about the so what. And the so what is the importance of that experience to you and how it's going to make you a better doctor. And so showing how it's impacted you and showing how it will make you a better doctor are the two things you want to impart in all of your extracurricular experiences. So I'll give you an example. So something that's more kind of description oriented talks about, so this person, they play the piano, they played in multiple settings. That's all you really kind of get out of it, right? But if you frame that same experience in a different way and talk about, how it's impacted you as a person and how it has related more towards becoming a better doctor, right? So things like consistency, thousands of hours of repetition and discipline, dexterous skills, connect with people, high pressure settings. Those diction choices are very specific in the sense that you're relating your previous experience to becoming a doctor because they're compatible with both, right? And you're also talking about qualities that have been imparted from these experiences, like lifelong learning, all areas of learning. So someone reading this is going to be like, okay, this person is thinking through this. They realize that this experience is going to make them a better doctor, even though it doesn't explicitly say this. References and interviews. So for references, you don't necessarily need to have them from someone in medicine. My tips would be find someone you've known for some years, if possible. Find someone who has worked with you in multiple settings, someone you know on a personal level. You can chat with them about other things besides work, so you have a strong connection. And when you ask them, ask for a strong letter and make sure you include that word strong because you want to have good letters in your application. Interviews. So again, these are more tips geared towards the non-traditional applicants, but the best tip I can give you is your unique experiences are strengths and not weaknesses when it comes to an interview. So for example, if you have a research background and you've given talks at conferences or presented posters, those skills will be very useful for when you actually do interview. If you have a background in engineering or commerce, chances are you've actually interviewed for a lot of other companies before, and those interview experiences will benefit you again. If you are more arts related, you like to perform on stage. If you are an English major, for example, are good at writing, speaking, those again are very valuable skills to have in an interview. If you're a parent, the qualities of being able to negotiate with your children, being able to counsel them, empathize with what they're going through and walk them along different experiences in life are all very beneficial qualities to have when it comes to an interview. And with practice, I think you guys will do an amazing job. The last thing I'll say is if you have a panel interview or more of a freestyle component, they will probably ask you why you did X experience before medical school. So just make sure you have an answer prepared. Make sure that answer is candid and make sure it answers those two things we talked about. So one, what did you learn or how has it impacted you? And two, how is that experience going to make you a better doctor? So in summary, what we talked about, viewing your unique experiences as strengths and not weaknesses, the right intentions, a good work ethic, you will put yourself in a position to succeed. And this one we didn't talk about as much, but there's definitely going to be a bit of a learning curve to applying to medical school, especially if you're making a sharp transition. I would say the easiest way to alleviate this is to get help from others. We are so fortunate in the Smiley community to have such a great network of people in the medical profession. Definitely feel free to reach out to them. They will be more than happy to help you because they've been through this before. They've been in the same spot, and definitely approach them, be kind, be humble, and be willing to learn from them. And you will be able to overcome all those barriers early on. And the last tip I have for you, probably the most important thing of this entire talk, is applying to medical school is a long process. Becoming a doctor is an even longer one. And as important as it is to be successful and aim for perfection, it is just as important, if not more important, to be happy and to be fulfilled. So be kind to yourself. If things don't go your way, have some self-compassion, be resilient, try again, and with the right intentions again and good work ethic, you will get there and you'll become a great doctor someday. So thank you very much. Good luck and best of luck on becoming a doctor.
Thank you, Kahir, for that thought-provoking conversation and presentation. Our next panelist is Serena Thijbarm. Serena is currently an MD candidate at the University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine. While studying at Western University, Serena worked to redefine post-operative patient experience and improve patient care. She was also commended for her commitment to improving the Canadian healthcare system and addressing inequalities in healthcare systems worldwide, following her experience as a trauma patient after a near-fatal motor vehicle collision in 2015. Her passions lie at the intersection of clinical medicine and health policy to address inequalities in healthcare systems worldwide. Thank you, Serena, for joining us today and agreeing to share your experience and knowledge with us.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you. As you know, my name is Serena, and I'm a second-year medical student at the University of Toronto. And as I am the closest out of the three of us to the application and interview process, I thought that I'd give you some of my personal tips for preparing for a medical school interview. To begin off, I know that you've seen some of the requirements to apply for medical school in the previous presentation, so I won't go over them again, but often the last step of the application process are interviews, which may look a little bit different this year due to the pandemic, so I will try and add in some tips for this particular cycle, where I know that many of you are recording yourself responding to a few of the prompts and sending that in. So to begin off, although this is not a comprehensive list, here are a few resources that I found to be incredibly helpful when I began preparing for my medical school interview. There are a couple of resources in particular where you can watch others respond to various interview questions and see how they formatted their answers or structured them. And this can be a very good starting point when you begin your preparation. And I wanted to discuss some pearls for preparing for your interview and then some related to when you're actually conducting your interview. So we'll begin off by some tips for preparing for your interview. So my first tip is to start off by creating a list of your key experiences. This may include extracurricular activities, research, clubs, any international experiences, and workshops that you may have participated in or even hosted. And for each of these experiences, think of times where you experienced challenges, where you had to lead. Think about why you did it and what you learned from it. What skills did you develop? And what skills did you improve upon? Write down how you think this experience in particular will help you become a better physician, and how they relate to the CanMed's roles of being a medical expert, a scholar, professional, communicator, collaborator, leader, and health advocate. This will be a repository of resources and examples that you can draw from when you're asked certain questions so that you can adapt or adjust your experiences to fit that particular question. Next, prepare a list of example interview questions that may come up. This is where those resources that I previously provided will come in handy. Often students are asked questions that relate to their own personal experiences, ethical scenarios, and the CanMed's roles. So examples of these questions, in addition to the ones listed on the slide, include a time when you worked in a team, a time when you went outside of your comfort zone, or were a leader, a time you had to resolve an interpersonal conflict, a time you had to teach yourself something, or a time when you were really proud of yourself. Thirdly, read and reflect on important topics in medicine. In addition to the 4 key areas of autonomy, which is respect for the patient's right to make their own decisions, beneficence, the duty to do good, non-maleficence, the duty to do no harm, and justice, to treat all people Equally and equitably, other topics include patient confidentiality, informed consent, and now more than ever, the pros and cons associated with virtual care. Leading up to your interview date, stay on top of current events and what is on the news. Try and form an opinion around what is happening and maybe the challenges around doing one thing over the other. An example of this during my interview cycle was organ donation. And there were discussions around whether or not individuals should be automatically signed up to donate their organs on their driver's license and have to actively choose not to, or whether they should have the ability and the option to choose that right up front. Lastly, as intimidating as it might be, practice, practice, and practice some more. Practice in front of a mirror or film yourself so you become aware of your body language and your facial expressions. Reach out to your network, and even though they may not be in medicine, ask them to ask you questions and time you for about 8 minutes. Ask them to give you feedback on your responses as well as the impression that you had on them. Although the content of your answers and your responses are very important, how you respond to these questions also play a part. And for those who are sending in recorded videos, I would suggest to record yourself answering a number of various questions and watch them and see how you can improve or be more concise or show more of what you have to offer. Now moving on to some tips for during the interview. My first tip is to remember that it is okay to take a moment right after you've been asked a question. Allow yourself to collect your thoughts and calm your nerves. And during this time, create a rough structure in your head with the main ideas, followed by all of the aspects that you'd like to address. And then the key experiences or examples from your life that go along with that question. This way, you'll be less likely to ramble and will not miss the key points that you want to talk about. Next, share your story and your experiences in every question that you're asked. Show them how you are a good fit for this profession, this program, and this school, but make sure that it is relevant to the question that you were asked. These interviewers listen to or will watch so many individuals' responses, so this is a way for you to show how you stand out amongst the others. Thirdly, for those questions that require you to describe what you would do in a given situation or take a stance on a topic, decide what you will do and stay firm on that. Do not change your mind, but explain why you made that decision and what you considered maybe when you went about making that decision. Remember that often there's no one right answer. So as long as you pick a decision, stick to it, and back it up by providing some background around why you did what you did, that should be enough. Fourth, just like a job interview, it is always nice to have a few questions prepared ahead of time. This may be less relevant for those who are recording their videos and sending that in, but ask about your interviewer's journey. Make it personal. Ask why they chose this particular academic institution or the specialty that they did. And lastly, I know that it may be so incredibly difficult to think this way, but in addition to them interviewing you and seeing if you are a good fit for their school, this is also an opportunity for you to see if this school is a good fit for you. You will be spending at least the next 3 to 4 years here, and you should ensure that you will enjoy your time here because medical school is a marathon and not a sprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena, for such a wonderful presentation. And now we have our final panelist, Dr. Zia Saleh. Dr. Zia Saleh is a family medicine resident physician at Alberta Health Services. Initially studying life sciences at McGill, Zia then went on to complete his medical degree at the University of Alberta. His interests lie in clinical medicine, but also in global education and public policy. Eventually, in addition to his clinical career, He hopes to be able to use knowledge from various fields to engage holistically in strategizing social impact interventions, both locally and globally. To the audience, if you have any questions for Dr. Saleh, please ask them in the designated question box. We will answer these questions at the end. We will now hear from our next panelist, Dr. Zia Saleh.
Thank you, Alia, and Yalimanet, everybody. I hope you're taking a lot of clinical pearls away from today about what the application is like for medicine. And today, I kind of want to just give you a bit of a perspective beyond that. So tell you a little bit about what life is like after you get in, rather than the earlier process that gets you there. And I think hopefully the purpose of that will be to help you make an informed decision about really how you're going to be spending the rest of your life. So currently, I'm a family medicine resident at the University of Alberta, and I've gone through the medical school process. I'm in my residency, and that perspective allows me to sort of share some of the bits about what life is like within residency and beyond. So hopefully you'll find that useful. All right. So just to start off with, I know everybody here is coming from different backgrounds, different career experiences, and you all have your own different perspectives, just like Kahir, Serena, and myself do. And so really the point of today is for you to be able to pull away what's useful from what we're saying and really not pay much attention to the rest. And so today, I hope that you're able to take some of that useful information and make a decision that's based on your own perspective about how you want to live your life and some of the values you'd like to sort of embody within that. Okay, so today, really just 3 objectives I want to hit. First of all, I want you to get an understanding of what you're signing up for in a life in medicine. I think a lot of the times we hear about the glamour and the glory of what life is, like as a doctor, but there are also parts that are a bit grim, just like in any other career. And so it's important to know that. These are bits of information I feel that I would have wanted to know before signing up to medicine. And I think perhaps for some people, it can change your decision or reinforce it. The second thing I want to share is really just describing some of the ways you can enrich your life before medicine, but also after you get in, right? Life doesn't end with just a medical career. There's so many other things that you can do in life. And it's important to pay attention to those because it's very easy to just get lost in the school and how much it kind of takes over your life at that point. But there are other ways to sort of touch on your other interests in your life. The reason I put this here as well is because it's not something that is sort of stuck after medical school or before. It's something you can engage in now and continue on. And ultimately, it'll help make you a better doctor as well as a better applicant. The third thing I wanted to discuss is the financial component of medicine. It's, quite a big investment to be able to pursue a medical career. For some folks who don't have financial wherewithal, it's really a big decision. And so I want you to get an understanding about how much it actually costs for you to be able to take this step. And then lastly, really, we'll just touch on a couple of alternative career options in case you're not interested in medicine, but just in health in general. Okay. So what is life like after getting into medical school? You've heard all of this stuff about the application and the interview, but what comes next? And so I want to break this down into some of the good aspects of being in medicine and then some of the aspects that are maybe not so good. And hopefully you can balance those as you make your decision. So a lot of this you've heard about, right? Of course, medicine is fulfilling profession. Its service is something that we speak about a lot within our faith context, and this profession is a way for you to viscerally experience that every single day and even sometimes see the difference you're making in somebody's life over the course of 24 hours. Financial well-being is another pro, although I would nuance this a bit. I think a lot of us think that, doctors are so well off and they make a lot of money. But you have to remember, as a doctor, you're going to be an independent practitioner, an independent business person. And so you don't get the benefits of working for a company, things like retirement, things like pension that you might pay for through the government. You don't get health insurance. All of this kind of stuff you got to siphon away from your gross income and protect it for your future. And so if you're in it for the money, there's way better ways to make money than being in medicine, but there will be some sense of financial well-being, assuming it stays the way it is in the future. Job security is another big component. Of course, right now, jobs are secure. Everybody needs a doctor, particularly in the context of a pandemic. But there are other threats to the profession, including artificial intelligence, and it's not a question of whether it will be part of what we do, but how much and in what way. And so I think job security will still persist for quite a bit of time, but it's, there are some uncertainties there as well, just like with the rest of, the world's professions. Social respect, that's pretty self-explanatory within the context of Canada and the world. You really get an automatic sense of social respect from people. Long-term flexibility, you're your own practitioner. So later on in life, you can decide how much you want to work and when, and decide, things like, your work hours for your family and so on. Another really great benefit of being in medicine is that you get excellent colleagues, people who are passionate about their work, who have a heart, who are usually interested in serving other people. And so it's a really good way for you to build a community, and friendships amongst people that you'll probably spend your life with. So that's a really good pro. The next pro there, automatic leadership. Now I've put this in the pro bucket, but it could very well be a con depending on your personality. But the reason I put this here is whenever you are in a hospital setting or a clinical setting with other health workers, you're going to be the one that people look to. Ultimately, the buck stops with you. If something goes wrong or right, you're going to be sort of the person that it's tagged to. And in times of an emergency, of course, people will look to you as well. So for some people, that's something they thrive on and like and want. For others, oh, hang on, maybe not so much. And so that's something to think about for sure. Lifelong learning. This is a really important one. We've heard a lot about why we should be doing this, but in medicine, you're forced. There's just so much medical material out there. It's changing all the time, and you really can't know everything at one point in time. So you're always learning, and you have to be able to be a good doctor. And that's going to be part of your life, career, until the last day, possibly even beyond. So that's something that I think is a pro. Career switch possibilities and worldwide recognition, definitely there. I think when you have an MD, even if you're not interested in practicing medicine later on in life, you have automatic recognition in fields outside of medicine, because there's like sort of like a badge that you're wearing that says, hey, you've gone through this training, you've jumped through these hoops, there's something valuable there that you can offer. And so I think that's a really nice pro. Okay, so you've probably heard a ton of those, but what about the cons? What are some of the things that are really not necessarily so good? First of all, after now, so you've done all your schooling and career work and whatever else you've done, but after now, you're going to be doing at least 6 to 9 years of training, depending on what residency you go into. And that training is going to be a time that's very grueling. It's going to be a time where you're underpaid, and it's going to be a time where if you don't have a lot of money, you're going to be bearing a large financial debt. And so that's really tough, right? Imagine, perhaps many of you are in your early 20s, your 30s or beyond. For the next significant portion of the next decade, you're going to be carrying all this if you do medicine. And that's something you should expect, perhaps try to embrace and be aware of if it's something you really want to do. And that can be tough. You also have limitations with your autonomy, because when you're in medical school or residency, somebody's going to be telling you where to be, how much you have to work, what you're going to be paid for that work. And that can be tough as well. So for instance, when I go on to a new rotation in residency, I generally expect that 2 of the weekends of that month, I'm going to be working at some point. And then for about 7 out of every 28 days, you're going to be on call, usually in the hospital or at home for approximately 24 hours. And some of those 24-hour shifts, you're working like the whole way through with 1 hour of sleep and that kind of thing. So you don't have a lot of say over your own life and schedule throughout medical school and residency. So that's something to know about. Relationship hurdles can be, of course, a byproduct of that. Basically, anything in your life that involves somebody else is going to have to be a negotiation, a compromise. Another con is that automatically, basically, when you enter medicine, your risk of mental health issues is going to increase. It's kind of a well-known reality that burnout, depression, suicidal thoughts, all these kinds of things come in the context of medicine because of all these other factors, most likely, right? And because of the grueling training, right? So if you have, just to give you a sense, there was a survey done by the Resident Doctors of Canada, and approximately 70% of residents worked at least 60 hours a week. That's not including all the other things you have to do in your life. That's not including your studying, which you definitely need to do. And 20% of residents work more than 80 hours a week. And the work that you're doing is not kind of just sitting around. It's really hard work dealing with people's lives, right? And so because of that, I think there's risks to your own personal health, especially when you're not paid well and when you are not having control over your life. So something to consider. Otherwise, because in Canada our healthcare systems are governed provincially, there's always risk of government getting involved. And in Alberta, we're seeing a lot of that fight, and that's something that would be a con potentially. A lifetime of hard work is what you're signing up for, and a lifetime of also personal risk, right? We're in the context of COVID, and a lot of us have had to see COVID patients. We've had to worry about whether we're bringing that home, whether we're going to transmit it to our partners, how much risk are we to the public when we go outside. All that kind of stuff weighs on you, and that's not just limited to coronavirus. There are other things that you're exposed to, blood and body fluids, belligerent patients, that kind of stuff. And so like with any profession, it comes with risks, and those are the kinds of risks to think about. So you have to take all these pros and cons, balance it out, and say, hey, yeah, this is what I'm interested in, and I want to sign up for it from an informed perspective. Or you may go the alternative route. Okay, so we've talked about what life is like in medicine a little bit. Now I want to switch gears and talk about what can you do to enrich your life outside of medicine. And I'm talking about this from the perspective of where you're at now, so before you get into medicine, but I think it's something very important to continue after. And the reason I say this is because really, I think getting involved in these kinds of activities is going to make your life more interesting, but it's also going to help you be exposed to other experiences that will make you a better doctor. So what do I mean by experiences that enrich your life? I'm talking about extracurriculars, really anything outside of formal education that you're doing to help you learn. Things like internships, work, travel, service work, sports, arts, anything, be creative. Now, why do these? I'm going to argue that this is a once in a lifetime perspective for you, or opportunity for you to gain experiential education. At this point in your life, hopefully many of you don't have families, you don't have significant financial risks, and you've got time to sort of route yourself into a career slot. And so that's not going to be there forever. You're going to potentially have families in the future. Life will just get busier. You're going to have more financial burdens and so on. And so this is a unique point in your life that you have hopefully time to be able to do this kind of thing. And that's why I say it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. But the things you'll do will also provide you a deep sense of meaning and fulfillment. If they're things that are enjoyable to you, they will make you stand out as an applicant. Everybody can get good grades. Everybody can get a good MCAT score. But what else can you do that's different? And these are the things that will make you stand out. Like I say, it'll help you become a better doctor. You're going to experience through these internships or jobs or service work lives of other people. You're going to hopefully experience different careers, and by doing that, you're going to build frameworks in your mind about how different people think, in different lives. You'll also be exposed to all these other fields. So when you meet patients that come from these backgrounds, you'll be able to understand what they're going through, empathize with them, and also think laterally to be able to help you make clinical decisions for them. And so hopefully it'll make you a better doctor. When should you start them? Now, if you definitely if you haven't, you should definitely start now. And where should you get these experiences? Really up to you. But I'd say incorporate diversity into it. So geology, right? Local, global, regional work. Try and mix it up. Content related. So do things perhaps that are in your field, but things that you completely have no idea about and want to learn. Try to mix that up a little bit. And even demographics, like are you working with young people, old people, people your age? Everywhere you can sort of incorporate diversity, the more you'll learn. And how should you start? It's kind of a hard thing to be able to get things going, but I'd say start from your own sort of criteria about what would be interesting and enjoyable, but also educational. You might want to start with an area of expertise that you have, or you might want to start with something where you have no expertise, you just want to learn about. On the right there, you'll see kind of some of the things that I got involved in. So, for example, interning and then, consulting for the World Health Organization in Geneva, working in management consulting, so business versus public policy at Deloitte, working within the institutions in education, so in global encounters, working in an artificial intelligence lab, many other things that I was able to do that enriched my life, exposed me to different fields, and helped me become a very strong applicant. So I encourage you to do that as well. Okay, so you've done an awesome application, you've done an awesome interview, you've gotten in, you've considered everything, you've maximized your extracurriculars, you're still going to do that. But now, how do you fund your medical education once you're in medical school? So the cost is something to first start out with, right? So on average, you're going to be paying in tuition and other medical school sort of expenses approximately $80,000 over the course of your 4 years, 3 to 4 years. And then if you're not staying in your hometown or with parents or anything like that, you may actually incur another $80,000 of debt for things like rent and food, travel. Lots of times you have to travel to other country or other cities and sometimes other countries to engage in electives. So there's all this kind of all these expenses that come on board. And this is in Canada. So if you go to the US, you're likely going to be paying even more. So that's a huge, huge amount of money to take into, a career you're starting late compared to sort of the rest of the world. So where can you draw finances from? Firstly, lines of credit. So when you get into medical school, the banks will hound you. They'll want to give you their line of credit. So you'll generally have access to a loan that is approximately $250,000 from the bank. There's interest that incurs on that whenever you take money out, and you'll pay that off after. The second place you can source money from is scholarships and bursaries. So there are lots available, but it kind of depends on what school you go to. If you are financially constrained, bursaries are a really good option because you don't have to pay those back. And there are a lot more out there that are not necessarily fully merit-based. The third place you can draw money from are Canadian and provincial student loans. You'll generally probably have access to most of the tuition money you need from these loans. And it's important to know, just stick this in your head for later, but Canada Student Loans offers a forgiveness plan if you engage in rural medicine. So even in your training, like in residency, if you do a couple months of rural, you can get up to $8,000 a year for 5 years. So, that's a total of $40,000 just for free for working within rural areas. And also military programs have other types of funds for your medical education if that's of interest to you. And then lastly, of course, your personal funds. So you can draw on all of these things to be able to pay for what is coming. I wouldn't worry about having access to the money, but I would think more deeply about, do you want to carry this burden and expense, for a significant portion of your life? Because it's important to know that before going into it. Okay, so you have heard all of this from me, and maybe you're asking the question, should I really go into medicine? What other options are out there? And so I think the question ultimately lies with you. It's a phenomenal career. It's very unique, very special. You get to meet people at their worst points in life and hopefully make a difference. And that's very exciting. But there's also a lot of burden and responsibility that comes with that. And so you might say, hey, well, I'm still interested in health, but maybe not in being in medicine. And so there are lots of other career options out here, right? Things like dentistry, optometry, occupational physiotherapy, even things outside of the clinical realm, management consulting and health, public policy, health administration. There's so many different things out there. And so what I would say is, as you think about your future, come up with the criteria you want to live your life by, and then see what profession, health or otherwise, kind of fits that. And so some of those criteria might be how much time you want to spend in your training, how many hours you'd like to be working, do you want to be on call, what is life going to look like if you have kids later on, and so on. All these kinds of things that will determine how you live your life are important to think about now rather than later. And I think a lot of people end up in medicine and then just realize, oh gosh, there's all this stuff I didn't think about. And so it's good to think about it now and make an informed decision. So hopefully, if this is all up your alley, you'll end up sort of like this person, happy working in medicine. And if not, that's fantastic too. And so there are lots of other amazing options out there. I'll leave it at that. We'll open up the floor for questions, but feel free to reach out at any point if you have anything. You can find me through the organizers, and I'm happy to sort of chat about whatever questions you have about medicine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zia, for providing a great perspective about life after med school, and to all our panelists for their presentations. We'd now like to move on to the question and answer period. So I'll begin with Ka here. Our first question would be, what advice would you give someone in terms of what they should do with their time to make themselves a better applicant?
The best advice I've gotten on this topic is to, one, do things that you fundamentally believe in. Because if you don't believe in something, you're probably not going to be able to do a good job on it. And then the second thing I would say is more from a strategic point of view, is to do things that, again, are going to enhance those qualities that align with being a good physician. And I think as long as you can justify those two things to someone else, you'll be golden.
You're right. It's really important to find things that you're passionate about and how they sort of fit along with what would make you a great physician. So I think that's some great advice. This next question is regarding sort of your career and your trajectory. So I know you've kind of pivoted a little bit with your career. Was it hard to transition from engineering to medical school? Like, what was that like for you? And can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
I mean, transitioning from engineering to medical school, it was hard for me. I'm not even gonna lie. I think everyone goes through a little bit of imposter syndrome at some point. And I think for a lot of people, it happens when they start medical school. But for me, it was when I started writing the MCAT. I had graduated. It was a bad feeling because I didn't have a job lined up. I decided to write this exam. I was stuck in a library. All my friends were traveling and having fun and had jobs and stuff. I didn't really know if this was going to work out, right? So it was definitely like a bit tricky that way. But I say the advice I'd give to someone is, in the way I kind of was able to manage it, is having a good, strong support network. So a good set of friends, family, people who've kind of been helping you since day one, and using them to uplift you when you're feeling down. They'll give you the encouragement and the will to keep trying and to succeed in the end. So
thanks, Kyra. I think that you're right. Like, it's really important to have like a good support network to help you through figuring out where you want to go with your career. And I'm so happy that you were able to figure that out. And hopefully this webinar is something that'll help our viewers to determine if, med school is the right way for them to go or not. So the next questions I have are for Serena. So Serena, you talked a little bit about interviews. So can you explain a bit more in terms of when you started to prepare for an interview?
So I received my invitation for an interview about 10 days before my interview date. So I started preparing right away. I began by creating a list of all the experiences that I had. What did I learn from them? What unique skills did I develop? What challenges did I encounter? And how do these experiences relate to the CanMeds roles? Then I started watching how others would have responded to some of the interview questions. I watched those videos. I saw how they formatted their responses and how they delivered them. Then I started practicing right away. Even though I wasn't interview ready, I found that the best way to improve my own responses and the delivery of them was through practicing.
Thanks for the answer, Serena. I think it's really important that, we have to practice. And the more we practice, the more comfortable we feel with answering these questions that we could face during an interview. Along that line, what do you think was the most important aspect of your successful interview and why?
I think the most important aspect of any interview is to show your personality through your responses. Interviewers will see hundreds of individuals interview, and they can really sense what you're passionate about and what drives you. So without sounding too cliched, I would remember to take a deep breath and just be you. Try not to sound so scripted and show what makes you unique and what makes you a good applicant to this program.
Awesome. Thank you, Serena. Our next questions are for Zia. So Zia, I know you talk about mental health being a challenge that we're constantly facing throughout the world right now within the various careers. Can you talk about a little bit more in terms of what mental health support services are available for students, especially in med school, because we do know that this is quite a challenge while in med school?
Yeah, so that's a really fantastic question. And I can only kind of speak to some of the experience that I have with my medical school, but I'm quite certain that a lot of the medical schools around the country follow a similar sort of process. So in medical school, what we have at the University of Alberta, for instance, is an office, actually an independent office called the Learner and Advocacy Wellness Office, and it's a place where you can go to speak to a staff physician about some of the issues that you're having in a confidential manner, and some of the struggles that you're going through in medical school. And, based on that discussion, if you feel that you need other services, they also have an in-house psychologist that's available for you to be able to provide, supports and help work through things with you. I think as part of that, if certain issues crop up, there's a way of sort of dealing with that and having those the staff in that office help you throughout your 4 years of medical school. And that even some of that kind of continues on into residency. So you don't have access to that office necessarily for medical school, but there are other structures in place where you can sort of reach out, talk to someone who understands what you're going through, have access to psychology services. And so you're definitely supported that way in a completely confidential manner. And it's known that mental health issues are a problem for medical students and residents. And so there's a huge attempt being made, I think, across the country to sort of address that problem.
I'm going to pivot a little bit with this next question. So say someone's gotten into medical school and now they're kind of planning for their residency. What's the best way for them to kind of plan which residency that they kind of want to go into?
Yeah, residency choice. That's obviously a major, major decision. So I think the answer to that comes from probably 2 or 3 areas. So number one, when you get into medical school, you hopefully have a very, very open mind about what you want to do. And so you can explore different things and see what you like, what you don't like. I think that one of the tools that can help you initially is sort of a career aptitude test that's actually just for medical residencies. And that's available for people to use and try. And you can do it at the beginning of medical school. You can redo it in your 3rd or 4th year when you're thinking about applying to a specific program. And it'll help tell you, it's very extensive, but it'll help tell you, based on your personality traits, the things that you like in life, the things that, the way in which you work, what kinds of careers in medicine might suit that. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, one of the big distinctions that people will make in terms of thinking about their residency decision is, do they want to operate from a surgical standpoint, or do they like more of the medicine bits? And so once you make that distinction, like, do you like procedures? Do you like working with your hands? Do you like mainly operations? Or do you sort of more like the cerebral sort of thought process type of thing? That's very different from, the majority of the day-to-day surgical work. And so when you make that decision, I think you'll have narrow down your options, and then based on your experiences in your 3rd and 4th year, you'll be able to sort of decide what fits with you. So that's the second, I guess, driver that can help. The third is really just talking to people. As you go through, you're going to be forced to go through all these different rotations, and you'll have the opportunity to see so many different things. You'll be able to talk to residents, see what they think about their life, talk to staff, look at them, see how happy they are, talk about, their families and their careers, and see how they live their life. And you'll be able to use that knowledge to help you make a decision. One thing I do want to comfort everybody by is that there's something for everybody. I think that there are so many different things available. Even if you don't want to ever see a patient in your life, there's something within medicine for you. So there's lots of options available, and you'll find your place once you're in.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing this very helpful strategies on applying to med school with us tonight. This webinar could not have been possible without the help of our webinar team. A special thanks goes to the AKEB webinar team, Nevim and Aries, for their tremendous assistance in making this webinar successful. Lastly, I would like to thank all our participants in the audience for taking the time to be with us today. All your questions added much value to the discussion, and we hope you enjoy the webinar as much as we did. We ask the audience to take some time to fill out the survey that is available under Share Your Feedback below. If you are joining us via YouTube, please click on the survey link in the description tab below the video, which will route you back to the II Canada page for this webinar. There, you can click on Share Your Feedback found under the title. If you have any additional questions or have any questions that were not answered today, please feel free to email them to us at the email addresses seen below. Finally, I'd like to remind everyone about the Access Line that allows you access to resources, information, and assistance of any type. The number is 1-888-536-3599. You can also visit the iicanada.org for further information on how to contact the Access Line. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you, and Yali.